It's been a minute since I put up a video. Here we go. Hey guys, welcome to the video. My name is Ryan Styles Harris. In this video today, I'm going to show you how I went about putting a cool custom look on my iCHARGER 406 Duo. I put up this picture a little while ago when I painted mine red. I also recently did this white one for this tutorial today, so we're going to go ahead and jump into it and show you just how I go about doing it. So we're going to jump right into this thing here. We have our iCHARGER 406 Duo, and we got to take all the plastic pieces apart so that we can change their color. So first things first, let's go ahead and get these screws out that we can see. Looks like we have a screw here and a screw here. So we'll give it a little tug here, see what happens. Okay, I think that's gonna be... Now you will see that there's a little ribbon in here. So we have to disconnect that, and we're just gonna be very careful. We obviously don't want to damage that. This little guy just flaps up, and then the ribbon pops right out. Now to get this piece off, it's a little trickier. The first thing that we're going to do is disconnect these fans carefully. This thing should kind of slide over these wires a little bit. So I'm not going to unsolder this or remove the plug or anything like that. Instead, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up painting this black, but I'm going to remove these fans. And what I ended up doing with mine is I just masked off the wiring and the whole assembly very carefully, and then I just spray painted this black. And then if I got a little bit of overspray of black onto this little gasket, this little rubber insert, it's not the end of the world because it's just black. These little things are kind of pressed onto some sort of little like stubs, and it was quite difficult on mine. I think I had to pry it off. So I don't know what your guys' experience will be if you're attempting this at home. This one feels a little bit stiffer, but I'm just gonna shimmy each corner a little bit at a time. I can see if I put too much stress on it, the little stub is starting to turn white, so I can tell it's about to snap. So I need to be very careful and make sure that I don't put too much pressure on any one corner more than another. So there's nothing else that we need to remove from this guy here. It pretty much is just a giant heatsink and a bunch of capacitors and resistors and stuff that I don't understand. And it makes our batteries go fast. Cool. Now, what would probably be a good idea here to remove these stickers and the little rubber foot thingies is to heat them up just a little bit so that they come off nice and easy. This little heat gun, made by Milwaukee, gets stuff hot pretty quick. Let's use our little hobby knife. Hopefully these things aren't going to be too resistant to our efforts. Alright, now last piece is this thing here. I remember I'll go ahead and apply a little bit of heat just to be safe. It's all about the details, guys, because when you get your thing painted at the very end and you can put all this stuff back on it, it just looks a little bit more like, you know, it came from the factory that way. Alright. Sticker came off in one piece. Okay, now this piece is going to be a little bit trickier because you have to take this screen out. You gotta take this sticker off and all the buttons out. So let's go ahead and flip it over and see what it looks like. Take all these screws off here. Okay, now all your buttons should come right out. Your big button is there. Okay, so now we're down to the LCD screen and this little sticker. So I'm going to go ahead and take these two screws out. There we go. Just a little tab right there was holding this top edge together. So just need a little bit of encouragement. Don't want to be too crazy. And that seems to come right apart. Comes right out with the back side here. This little tab here is on each side. And we got to basically push them in. Go ahead and push the other one. Okay, there we go. We need to take off this plastic screen cover. It's all one piece. Now, be warned, when I took mine off last time, this little lettering has like a silver foil behind it to give it its color. And when I peeled it off, it kind of ripped it apart a little bit, and you could tell that it damaged it a little bit. So we're going to try and avoid that here, but we may end up suffering the same fate, but we'll do our best and see what happens. Not too much, because we definitely don't want to hurt or change the appearance of the clear plastic. Very, very, very carefully. Get underneath this thing and start carefully peeling it back. So far, so good. Aha, success. Okay, so last piece is going to be this little sticker on the front here. So it should be pretty easy to take off. Will you apply the same method of a little bit of heat? Let's use something a little bit more blunt so that we don't cut through the sticker. Now again, we don't want to destroy anything, so don't go too crazy, because we do want to try and put this back on. So try not to rip, tear, cut, or scratch it. It's a pretty durable sticker. I think it's like a piece of plastic that has a sticker on top of it. But there, we managed to take it off in one piece. Still pretty sticky on the back. Probably just be able to stick that right back on. Okay, and now we have this piece totally stripped down, ready to prep and paint. This is the part where I would show you guys some nice B-roll of when I painted this charger. I have no idea what happened, but when I dragged all the footage of the taking it apart, putting it back together, and the painting, somehow the footage from the painting part of this just didn't come on, didn't show up, and I can't find it. So it's gone. I apologize. However, I'll still do my best to give you guys some tips on the paint selection and the process itself, and hopefully that will be enough to get you on to the next step. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have. So when it comes to the paint, I just used a regular Krylon paint that you find at Home Depot. I used the matte finish white, and we used a total of 3 coats to get the color desired in this video. As far as the method for putting it on, I always use a very simple method of 1 light base coat, let that dry, 2nd coat, take a look at the coverage, see if we're getting close to the color we need, and 1 final coat after that second one is dried to get the final color that we want in this particular project. Once you've painted everything, you definitely want to let this set for, I let mine set for well over a day so that the paint was nice and hard and ready to be handled and assembled again. If you rush it and the paint is still soft, there's a couple steps that you'll see later in the video where you're going to have to apply a little bit of pressure and force on the plastic pieces to get them to go back together, and you will ruin the finish if the paint isn't completely dry. So set aside the time that you need to let this project take the necessary time. Hope that makes sense. So again, if you have any questions, comment down below. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and put all of our painted pieces back together and wrap this thing up. First thing I want to do is I want to put the screen back into this piece here, and then we'll move on from there. So we want to be very careful, not damage anything or get our fingerprints on this screen here, because that would be a pain to try and clean it off. Now if I remember correctly, the first thing that I did was I actually put the sticker back onto this piece here. The branding on the top. These little guys, they have like a slot in them, and when you put them back into this little screen and the little hole here, you'll see it probably better if you're at home doing it yourself, but you'll see that there's a little ledge of plastic right here, right next to the plastic framing, and you kind of have to line this edge up with that slot in order to get this thing to go back in. You see how the slot is kind of lined up with that guy there? If you don't do that, it's not going to set well or go in at all. Now, you want to make sure that when you're doing this, that your paint has had a plenty amount of time to dry, because you're going to be applying a lot of force and holding this. So if your paint is not completely hard or ready to be worked with, you're going to mess up the paint that you just put on here. This little guy and this little guy, they get pressed into in a very specific orientation. As you can see, that's not a perfect circle. It's kind of like an elongated, round looking end piece there. So you got to get those set just right. So the angle of this door is going to determine whether or not you'll be able to initially set them in there correctly. Get this screen kind of setting in here. Now I do remember that this was a little bit tricky. So you feed the ribbon through the bottom here. So as you can see, feed the ribbon through right just on that bottom side. And now we're going to try and snap this back together. Let's go ahead and put our little screw back in there. Okay, so now we have the screen back in place and its casing put back together. We're going to move on to the rest of the assembly process here. And let's go ahead and put our fans back onto this guy here. Don't want to break anything or ruin our fancy paint job, so just take your time. So I decided to use my drill to put these screws back together because that little Phillips over there isn't doing a great job, and of course I can't find any of my other Phillips screwdrivers. So this piece is what plugs into the main components of the charger, but then this little plug right here needs to receive this little guy, so we'll go ahead and plug that back together here. But before we do that, got to put our buttons back in. So this guy should still have plenty of stickiness to go back on. Okay. So far so good. Plugging this back in. So now the top half is pretty much all put back together and ready to be plugged in. So this little back piece, it does line up a certain way so that you can use those plugs on the back side. So make sure that those are lined up properly. And now we should be ready to set this back in. The black piece, it sets in the little groove back here. So we'll go ahead and plug these back in. So I went ahead and put the little front plate back in there. You kind of have to set it on the circuit board first, and then you can drop it down into the groove that's on the bottom side of this case. Got to put our little tab into this little guy right here. Remember that little tab lifts up, we'll slide it in and we'll snap it back down. So now we're going to see if the front and back plates line up and everything sets flush, which I think it does. We'll go ahead and put all the screws back in place, and then it will sandwich everything together. Once you put all the screws back in place, we'll go ahead and put some of our stickers back on. Some of my little rubber pieces and there you have it, guys. Your custom painted iCHARGER 406 Duo. It's a pretty simple process if you just take your time, make sure that you do everything correctly. It's a nice way to have a cool looking charger. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.